Hello guys, in this video I will show you a comparison. From the right, that is the real aircraft, the middle, that is the TOLISS, and the left, that is the Fenix aircraft. I'm gonna show you my opinion about how the aircraft behaved compared with the rear airplane during the descent phase of flight. In this flight, the airplane was with around 64,000 kilograms of weight, descending from flight level 390 to Sierra Bravo Tango Echo Airport here on the north of Brazil. As you can see, we are flying direct to the initial approach fix of this airport, that is Tango Echo 371, descending to 3,300. The airplane is in managed mode, no restrictions applied on FMS, no altitude restrictions, no speed restrictions added. We have absolutely no changes in the lateral and the vertical revision of the MCDU. My goal here is to demonstrate that without any kind of intervention, the airplane will descend, reduce speed to 250 knots below 10,000 feet, get inside the initial approach phase of the procedure, get the deceleration point, allow us a window to reduce speed to apply flaps 1 and also flaps 2 on the final approach. Again, without any kind of intervention, no speed brake applied, no constraints on lateral and vertical revision of the MCDU. Now we're going to show you the comparison from flight level 390 until 300. Notice that here we have the distance from the rear aircraft, the TOLISS, and the Fenix. You will notice that the TOLISS have a more shallow descent and Fenix aggressive descent. You can see that the airplane is closer to the airport when they start the descent. The rear airplane is starting the descent at 119 nautical miles, the TOLISS 122 nautical miles, and the Fenix 111 nautical miles. The wind difference from the day that I flew this aircraft in real life and in the simulator, it's around 5 knots difference and 20 degrees difference from the day that I flew in the flight simulator. Let's speed up a little bit to around 30,000 feet. And now I'm gonna synchronize the three aircraft at 30,000 feet. You will notice during this descent, the three aircraft are maintaining around 2,300, 2,200 feet per minute. Only TOLISS is maintaining around a little bit less because of this shallow descent that it's being executed by this aircraft. Here I'm gonna synchronize around 30,000 feet, three aircraft at 90 nautical miles from the airport. Notice that the rear plane is 31,100 feet. The Fenix is around 31,500 feet, a little bit higher in the path, and the TOLISS around 29,200 feet, a little bit lower on the descent path. Now our next check mark will be around 20,000 feet. Here at the 55 miles from the destination, the rear airplane is around 20,400 feet, the TOLISS 19,600 feet, and the Fenix 21,000. It's around 600 feet above the rear airplane path. From 20,000 feet until the deceleration point, let's see the behavior. You will notice that the airplane continues to descend at 2,000 feet per minute, a little bit less at 1,700 feet per minute, and the Fenix around 1,800 feet. The next phase will synchronize the airplane arriving at 10,000 feet and 250 knots. And we're gonna compare the behavior before this phase. Now at 10,000 feet, Notice that the airplane reduced to 250 knots to comply with the 250 knots below 10,000 feet limitation, and then the three aircraft start the descent. Notice that the rear airplane is at 22 nautical miles, the TOLISS at 22 nautical miles, and the Fenix is 14 nautical miles, too close from the airport. The next critical phase is the activation of the approach phase. Notice that the approach phase on Fenix is around 7 miles from the destination initial approach fix, and it's a completely different point from comparison with the TOLISS and the rear aircraft. Now let's sync it on the beginning of the procedure, on the initial approach fix. Notice the behavior of the airplane starting the procedure. Notice that the rear aircraft is a little bit higher in the procedure. The TOLISS is maintaining 4,700, almost exactly like the rear airplane. And look at the Fenix, 6,500, almost 2,000 feet higher in the procedure before beginning the turn to the procedure. Notice the three airplane now turning into the initial approach fix. Again, Fenix 1,900 above the procedure. The behavior of the rear airplane is almost the same thing every procedure. It will cross over all the altitude limits, maintain the speed limits. The airplane will always get you a little bit lower in the procedure to allow us reducing the speed through the first notch of flaps with the aircraft leveled at the final segment. Now I'm gonna synchronize the three aircraft on the final turn. Notice that the rear airplane is now in speed out star. The airplane will be level at 1,900, reducing the speed. Approach phase is being activated, allowing us to start to apply flaps and gear down. The TOLISS is starting the final approach segment, around 900 feet higher, but giving us the opportunity to start decelerated aircraft with a shallow descent, allowing us to put to the flap 1, flap 2, and gear down. But now look close what Fenix are doing. We are at 3,500 feet, at 260 knots, turning to the final approach segment. The airplane never gives us an opportunity to level off and reduce the speed. Notice that every time we need to make an intervention to the descent path, using speed brake or lowering the gear too earlier, and this is not what the rear airplane or the TOLISS are demanding. The airplane will always make a descent path, creating some segments with the level off, giving this opportunity to reduce the airplane and then start to apply flaps, lower the gear on the right schedule. Don't think that this is an isolated symptom that happens only in this approach. You will notice the same behavior every time that we are trying to land the Fenix. Notice here in Sierra Bravo Echo that we are synchronized at 10 miles from the airport. We notice that the rear airplane is at 6,400, the TOLISS at 7,700, around 1,200 above the path of the procedure. And notice that the Fenix is around 3,200 feet above the path that the rear aircraft is creating. Fenix is not respecting 250 knots below 10,000 feet. The airplane is around 280 knots, 1,200, 1,500 feet per minute during the descent to the initial approach fix. Fenix is around 2,100 feet per minute during the descent. Now I'm gonna sync all the three aircraft at 3 nautical miles from the initial approach fix. The rear airplane is now leveling up to activate the approach phase. It will respect this 4,500 constraint from the initial approach fix. The TOLISS is a little bit higher, 1,200 feet above the procedure, but it's a shallow descent and really close to the green dot speed, around 230 knots. The Fenix, it's 3,200 above, and look at the speed, 280 knots. It's almost impossible to reduce this airplane without any kind of intervention. Now the rear airplane is activating the approach phase. Now let's sync the aircraft turning to final. Notice that the rear aircraft is now getting in the final approach. 3,400 during this final turn. The TOLISS is now activating the approach phase on the short final at 3,000 feet, a little bit lower on the path, allowing us to reduce the speed, apply flaps, everything on a schedule. The Fenix is completely lost, more than 1,000 feet above the procedure, arriving at almost 300 knots. How this airplane will reduce the speed? How this airplane will allow us to apply the flaps 1? Again, both aircraft, TOLISS and the rear airplane, not a single intervention on the speed constraints or altitude constraints or use of speed brakes. Everything done in a managed mode with almost the same wind condition. We almost never need to do any kind of intervention unless we have some instructions from the ATC. This is not a behavior that is isolated, that happens sometimes. It's on every approach that we try to do in the Fenix. The airplane is almost always completely lost on the speeds, on the altitude constraints, not respecting 250 knots below 10,000 feet. The airplane is too aggressive on the descent path. The geometric descent path is always too close to the airport.